Hey guys, Alglilic here, coming from my nerd room again to show you another cosplay tutorial video. This time I'm going to talk about texturing foam, deep texturing foam, adding texture in a reverse way, carving it out as opposed to layering up texture and building on top of foam. I'm going to be working on a project I've been working on it for a while, which is this Mandalorian helmet, which is almost done. I'm just adding a really cool dragon scale look to it. This is a side that's done, and you can see it has these really deep texture spots in it, a lot going on. There's a ton of texture. It's going to look really cool when it's done, but I've saved the other side for you to show you just how I did it. All right, so to start, let's talk about things that you will need to get this project going. You will need a wooden surface board or some sort of surface that won't warp or melt, your craft cutting board, a cutting knife, a sharpening tool, a heat gun, and a soldering iron. I will set mine to 300 degrees. So let's start with what we're trying to do here. So I'm trying to get this really cool dragon scale texture, and you'll notice that there's different size scales everywhere. They're not uniform. I did start out with a uniform scale, and we'll talk about that, but I wanted this to look like what a real dragon skin would look like. Granted, I've never seen a dragon, so I don't know, but I looked at a lot of photos online and knew I didn't want it completely uniform. There's a couple ways you can do this. And a popular way, and there's already pre-made dragon scales out there in foam that you can just buy. And how those look is they start like this, and you can just layer actual dragon scales, and that way they're all uniform. You can cut them out with a Cricut cutter. You can do this if you want. Like I said, I was going for a more organic textured look. It's going to be a little bit more work for me as far as the pattern goes, but I think the results will look a lot cooler when it's finished, and I can't wait to show you that reveal video. What I did ahead of time is mark out where additional pieces of foam are going to go on this helmet. So you can see right here, this is where these ear pieces will go on the Boba Fett helmet. And I have them all cut out. They just need to be finished up and seamed. And then these will go right here. There's also a strip that goes across the middle, and there's also a strip that gets added on down the back. So I pre-marked out where those are gonna go. That way I don't waste time in doing texture where it's not needed. Also, I want the foam to be able to lay flat when I glue it down and not have to worry about foam not adhering flush. So I've worked all around those edges. I cut into a few of them a little bit, but it won't matter. So where did I start? I started right in the center, and I took a scale that I cut out in 1mm craft foam, and I laid it in the very center, and then I drew around it in Sharpie. And I did this for the first row, and then I did it for the second row. And the reason why I stopped tracing out the scale pattern was because the helmet's gonna curve, so it made it quite difficult. So what I did was, as soon as I got done going across the top, and as soon as I got done going in these layers, I figured out the point where the scales would have to turn. That way from the front, all these scales would come across, like on this side. And about when I got down to the edge of the curve here, that's when I decided to bend one this way, and then start making the scales come down off of that one. So you can see I completed it all the way down to the front here. And then same in the back. Here you can see this last scale. I did all of these right in a row, just there's like 6 or 7 of them on top. And then right when I got down to where it started curving downwards, I just curved the scale down with it. Now from here on out, I'm actually going to freehand the scales, and that might freak some of you out, but it's okay. It's okay. Also, you can see a pattern I started out with that I neglected. I didn't end up liking that pattern. So whenever I do that, I usually switch colors. So you can see here, I switched to the green, and then I know to follow that pattern. If it makes you feel better, you can trace out the pattern if you want. It's usually the tips of the scales come down and then meet up. I'll try to do that nicer for you. That should look more like this and more like this. And you can use the scales if you want to trace it, but what's What's difficult is where this starts curving down. So this is where you have to kind of change the plan a little bit. So we're gonna have to add a whole another scale in here. And you have to think a bit creatively on how this would turn. And that changes the scale size, which is why I had to stop using or stop tracing the scale pattern. And I like that the scales are different. So if it's easy for you, you can just add where you want all these to go. And from the front, remember we have to start curving it because we want all these to come across this way. So we know what you can kind of do to help yourself out is you know that this one will go like this. And then you can kind of fill in the gap of how that would work. So we'd add one in there. And then we would curve it down again. And now we can get our scale pattern. It's kind of confusing, but the more you do it, the easier it will get. Organic patterns are the most difficult. Next step is to take a box cutting knife and make sure it's sharp. I talked about this in my intro to foam cutting video, but you're gonna wanna pass this through a sharpener quite a few times. You'll sharpen it between every 4 or 5 scales. And I'm gonna fast forward through most of these, but I do wanna show you how it works for the first few. I'm just gonna come in, not super deep. I covered this before on my other video, but you can mark on your blade the thickness of the foam so you don't put your blade in past this thickness. That's the little trick that I use. So I'm going in just barely about 2 millimeters into where I colored on the blade. And I'm beveling the cut inward. I'm going in and I'm turning, instead of having the knife straight in like this, I'm turning the knife like this at an angle. So I'm going to go ahead and make these cuts and angle the blade under so that way this scale will be slightly lifted later, and I will show you that. So go ahead and make your cuts. Again, not too deep in. That's why it helps to make your little cheat guide on your blade so you know how far you can cut in. Next step is to heat these with your heat gun on low. So make sure you have this set to low. And then you can watch the shapes start developing. It's kind of like magic. As I heat it, you can see the shapes start to form. The reason why we beveled the blade is because I wanted these to pop out a little bit. I wanted the scales to be able to lift up so later I can stick my nail under here or stick a tool under here and actually pull the blade out just a little bit. And that's what comes from beveling. Carving into foam is a lot different than adding on foam, like I talked about earlier with adding these pre-cut scale bits. It's gonna look way different and a lot more organic. One thing I pride myself on is being really great at putting organic textures into foam. One thing you can do once you've already heated it and you can see where your line is more, you can come in again and deeper this time. I'm pushing the edges of my line on my foam. See that? I have it coming almost down to how deep the foam is. So I'm kind of really pushing it here. And I'm gonna go under the scale and I'm gonna cut way up and under here. And you can see me lifting it up. And on the other side, cut real deep in. And now you can see the scale really moves. That's something that you wouldn't get as much working in layered scales. And if you've ever sculpted before, or you've worked in modeling clay, then think about how you cut into the clay and how you build down texture instead of build up texture. Foam's no different if you start learning how to carve and sculpt foam. Okay, so now I have both sides done, but this side is like done, and you can see this side doesn't have the deep texture yet. It's just kind of nice, even scales, and it looks good. It just, to me, after years and years of doing this, it looks like I, carved in some foam and heated it up, and it's nice and uniform, and that's cool. But this type of look, once it gets all the paint on it, and once I highlight it and low light it and high gloss this baby, it's gonna look amazing. So that's just the difference between years and years and years of cosplay and hello, I'm new, but this still looks cool. This next part you should definitely wear a mask for, because heating the foam to more of a melting point will cause a bad odor or gas in the air that you shouldn't breathe. So make sure to wear a mask, and make sure anytime you're setting down your hot tools, like the heat gun or like the soldering iron, that you set it down on your wooden cutting board or whatever you can use that doesn't melt, because it will melt through your really, really nice cutting board. All right, so how do we make this texture stand out even more? How do we make it look like the other side? This is the part that I want to show you. So you're gonna choose a side. On the other side, I chose to go on the right side of each of the scales, just under, and I really focused on going deep on each side of those scales, almost like a shadow. If you noticed, if you look at this scale right here, it is much deeper cut on this side than it is on this side. So pick a side. I did it on the right on that side. Let's see, I'm right-handed, so I think it'll just be easier for me to continue doing that. And you're going to come just under the scale, and 300 degrees is best. I did try it at 400 degrees and it heated the foam way too much and melted it a bit much, but I got through it. So again, I'm gonna pick underneath the right side of the bottom of each scale. And I'm just lightly touching my soldering iron to the foam underneath the scale and burning it. And again, see the smoke coming off of this? This is the foam burning. That is not safe to breathe. Make sure you are in a well-ventilated area as well as wearing a mask. Repeat this step all over the helmet until you've done it just like the other side. And then I like to add little bits of texture on each scale as well. You don't need to do that. This looks pretty good on its own. But you can come in and add little scale marks, little dents in the scale if you want, just to give it some nice texture. Just like that. Thanks for watching my texture tutorial. I plan to do more of these because I love working with texture in foam. I'll have the video on what this will look like later on. It's gonna get a high gloss. I think I'm gonna do a play on matte black with glossy black. We'll see, but this is gonna be a really slick black dragon Mondo helmet. Again, this side is done in texture. This side is not, but you can see where I've deepened the texture and added it as in the tutorial. And I'm excited to see how this comes out. So tune in, make sure to follow my YouTube channel if you want to see how this Mondo helmet turns out. Also, make sure to click in the links below. I have a link to TNT Cosplay Supply. I'll get a tiny kickback if you order their cosplay, if you order cosplay foam through them. Make sure to save the link in your favorites so you can keep going back to that. All TNT Cosplay Supply foam. You will love it. I love it. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitch if you want to see me build live there. Thank you so much, and make sure to hit like and comment below.